Hello everyone and welcome back to Almost There, a Twisted Tale here on Disney Magic. I'm of course your host Zach, and welcome to chapter 34. Let's get into it. The Louisiana Bayou, Sunday, February 1927, 2 days before Mardi Gras. Up and at 'em, Tiana clapped her hand as she walked around the makeshift camp they'd set up last night, rousing her crew. She nudged Charlotte with the toe of her boot. "Wake up, Lottie, we're already behind and we still have to pry the boat loose." Naveen stood from where he'd slept, slumped against a tree trunk. He stretched his arms out up in the air, moving his neck from side to side as if it was working out kinks. Not the best sleep of my life, but not the worst either. I'll have an order of flapjacks with maple syrup," Lewis said as he twisted beneath his palm-frond blanket. Tana poked him with a branch. "This isn't a diner, Lewis. Wake up, we need to get going." She rolled up her blanket, tying it with twine and looping it over her shoulder. "Grab those poles," she instructed Naveen and Lewis, "and pray that we can dislodge this boat." She looked to the sky. "The rain passed us by last night, but that doesn't mean we'll be so lucky today." 10 minutes later, they were trudging through the mud on their way back to the boat. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Lottie asked. It's easy to become disorientated when every tree and shrub look the same. "It's the right way." China pointed to a cypress tree that canted to the left, its branches nearly touching the ground. "See this tree? The one bending over like a gentleman taking a bow? I made note of it last night as we were searching for a place to camp out. There's another one a few yards away that looks as if someone carved a portrait of a cat in the bark." They continued their trek through the marsh. The area around their camp spared from last night's consumptuous rainstorm, but judging by the saturated grounds, this part of the bayou had got a good soaking. "There it is," Lottie pointed out. "The cat ears etched into the tree bark." "Dang, Tia, you sure are good at this camping around the bayou business. I still don't get it. How do you even come to know about all of this?" "Maybe I can explain it to you one day," Tiana told her. She still wasn't sure how to address the questions Lottie would undoubtedly have about Mama Rhoda, and wondered if maybe she could give her friend a little insight into what had happened the year before. But how would she even broach the subject? "You don't know this, Lottie, but Naveen and I were both turned into frogs at your Mardi Gras ball last year. Oh, and Lewis? We met him while travelling through this bayou. He was a gator at the time." Lottie would fall away in the dead faint. It was probably better to keep things as vague as possible when it came to discussing her prior dealings with these bayous and the quirky lady who lived there. Naveen and Lewis had travelled ahead and were already at the boat where she and Lottie arrived. Tiana quickly joined them, adding her muscle, but the boat remained rooted in the tangled branches. She walked around to assess the situation from the other side. Tall shoots of cattail cradled that side of the vessel, their fluffy brown ends thwacking against the wooden hull. She leant in closer, shoving the stalks to the side with her elbow, but there were so many that most flapped right back into place. "If I can just get these out of the..." The tall plants parted. She looked over her shoulder to find Naveen holding the cattails at bay with a branch. "Way!" Tiana finished. His eyes brimmed with infectious humour at the familiar kindness she'd come to associate with him. "Thank you," Tiana acknowledged his help with a gentle smile. He shrugged. "Hey, that's what friends do for each other, eh?" Was he her friend? It was starting to feel that way, particularly after their conversations yesterday. Their playful banter had been a delight, harkening back to the time they'd spent together on this very bayou almost exactly 1 year earlier. Maybe once they returned to New Orleans and she put all this horrible business with the Shadow Man behind her, the fates would take pity on them and allow a semblance of friendship between her and Naveen. It wasn't part of the deal, but given the way she'd unswervingly held up her end of the bargain, there should be room for a few concessions, she sighed. You knew what you were signing up for. As far as her relationship with Naveen was concerned, at least. It was the other thing that she hadn't signed up for, that looming threat that had served as a catalyst for this trip that she should be focused on. No more daydreams. She needed to get to Mama Rhoda. While Lewis and Naveen tried their hardest to lift the boat's bow, Tiana worked her branch underneath it. She did the same with the stick they brought back, wedging it as far as she could. Fortunately, it wasn't far at all. There was no way this would give them the leverage they needed to push the boat free. "Lottie, over here," Tiana called over her shoulder. "Me?" Charlotte yelped. "Your clothes are already dirty," Tiana said. "A little more mud won't kill you. Put all your weight on that edge of the stick." Despite the effort she put into each thrust, neither she nor Charlotte had the muscle required to move the boat. "As much as I hate to admit this, I think we need more manpower on this end," Tiana said. "Do Just remember you're the one who said it, Naveen told her as he grabbed onto the end of the branch she held. Lewis joined Lottie. On the count of 3, Naveen said, 1, 2, 3. They pushed down on their respective branches and the boat moved a smidgen. Yes, again, Naveen called. Again. It's working, Tiana said excitedly. Yes, it is, Naveen said. The only problem is at this rate, I fear it will take us about 3 days to get the boat free. You're right, her shoulders slumped. No giving up just yet, Naveen said. He approached the front of the boat again and peered at it from several angles. Ah, yes, there's a little more room here. If I can get my hand in front of the boat, maybe I can push. Be careful, Tiana called. He looked back at her, one brow cocked in inquiry. You are concerned about my welfare, eh? That's good to know. Goodness, is he capable of turning that charm off for even a second? Just push the boat, Tiana said. He winked at her before turning his attention back to the task. She watched as he manoeuvred his hand through a small gap in the vines and branches. It was just wide enough for him to sneak in there. Tiana wasn't sure he would be able to do much with one hand, and there certainly wasn't enough space for him to get a second palm on that boat. Still, he pushed and pushed and pushed. Maybe if I switch hands I can... Watch out for that. Ow! Naveen bellowed as a sharp piece of wood scored his flesh. He jerked his hand free and clutched it against his chest. Tiana could see blood seeping through the fingers covering his injured hand. She let go of the stick and ran to him. What happened, Lottie asked, coming up alongside her. Let me see it, Tiana said. He pulled back when she reached for his hand, but she refused to back down. I need to see how bad it is. He finally relented, slowly letting his uninjured hand fall away. Oh, Lottie screeched, skittering back to where she'd come from. I hate blood. I'll stay over here. Liz put a hand on to his stomach. Blood makes me feel squeamish. Tiana rolled her eyes at the two of them. She winced as she studied the nasty, jagged gash marring Naveen's previously unblemished skin. Flesh around the cut puckered. Give me just a minute, she said. She walked over to the side of the boat and retrieved the bag that had held the remaining food. She searched inside for the handkerchief she used to wrap up some biscuits, sticking it in the front pocket of her coveralls before making her way back to Naveen. Give it here, she said again. Holding his hand, she grabbed the edge of his shirt and began dabbing at the cut. I hope this wasn't your favourite shirt. In fact, it was, he said. Her eye flew to his. Before she could apologise, he smiled and said, I'm only kidding. You, she growled, trying to hide under her smile. How could he both be endearing and insufferable at the same time? She concentrated on clearing the small particles of wood from his hand. Ow, Naveen said, slightly jerking his hand away. I'm sorry, Tiana whispered. It's a pretty nasty gash. I'm sure it stings like the dickens. I'm not sure what the dickens are, but if they feel like fire, then yes, it stings like the dickens. She cleaned the cut as best she could, but it still didn't look good. I wish I had some iodine or something to put on it, she said. I'm afraid this will become infected, especially out here in the swamps. Who knows what kind of parasites are lurking here? Well, that is very discomforting, Tiana. I would have rather you not mention that at all. I'm sorry, she murmured again. She reached for a handkerchief in her breast pocket, scratching her own knuckle on Mrs. Rose's brooch as she retrieved it. She took out her handkerchief, making sure there were no crumbs from the biscuits that could stick to the cut. She wrapped the cloth around his injury, then pulled the ribbon holding her hair in place and used it to secure the dressing. There you go, Tiana said. She shook out her hair, letting it fall to her shoulders. When she looked up at him, Naveen was staring back at her, a compelled spark of wonder in his eyes. In that moment, it felt as if they were alone, just the two of them in this quiet, cosy corner of the world. This is the second time you have tended to my wound, he said. Thank you. His voice was low and soft, like a feather brushing across her skin. You're welcome, Tiana whispered, still staring into his eyes. She told herself to look away. The feelings swirled through her as she continued to stare at him were dangerous. But these feelings were too potent, too irresistible for her not to nudge them for just a moment longer. She stared into Naveen's hazel-coloured eyes and tumbled headfirst into the fantasy of what it would be like if she never agreed to Facilier's demands. What if, after getting off the boat from Maldonia, Naveen had walked through the doors of Duke's Cafe for a cup of coffee, taken one look at her, and decided she was the one for him? How magical would it have been if he had whisked her away and pledged his love for her? She would have had everything she ever wanted. Naveen, her restaurant, her daddy. No, her daddy would be dead, and who knew if she would have had her restaurant at all. It was easy to constantly harp on what the Shadow Man had cost her. She would never forget what she's gained from their deal. Tiana cut her eyes away from Naveen's and dropped his hand. "We need to get this boat dislodged and be on our way," she said. She turned back towards the stick she'd found and gripped the end of it. "Come on, Lottie, you need to put some muscle into it." Tiana could see Naveen walking towards her out of the corner of her eye. "You can stand over there," she threw out her shoulder. "We don't need you injuring your hand anymore." "But Tiana..." "We've got this," she said. She sensed her despondency, but she couldn't concern herself with Naveen's feelings right then. Dabbling in those games of what ifs was foolhardy. More than that, it was dangerous. It caused her to forget what was at stake and how deadly things could turn out for all those she loved if she wasn't careful. Naveen's love was something that could never be hers. It had only taken a split second to weigh the pros and cons, and she decided his safety and the safety of her family and having her daddy back in her life was worth the cost. She couldn't forget that now. "Lewis, why don't you go get in the boat and start the engine? Maybe the motor's power, along with our own elbow grease, will be just the thing we need." "I can do that," Lewis said. He climbed aboard the boat and settled at the stern. Tiana had hoped his weight would help pop the boat's bow out of the branches, but it didn't. "Ready?" Lewis asked. "Ready," Tiana called back. He revved the motor, and to her utter relief, the boat began to winch back. "Yes, it's working, Lewis. Hit it again." The motor whirled, and she and Lottie pushed harder. Tiana," Naveen said. "Not now," Tiana told him. "Again, Lewis." The motor roared again. "Tiana, you may want to..." Naveen started, but Tiana stopped him. "Wait," he said. She sniffed. "What's that smell?" She looked up and noticed a plume of grey smoke coming from the back of the boat. "Oh no, Lewis, stop! Stop!" It was too late. Tiana knew the moment she heard the motor rev one last time, then sputter, that they were in trouble. Her entire body slumped as her spirits deflated like a popped balloon. "That did not sound good," Naveen said. "What happened?" Lewis asked. "I think the motor burned out," Tiana said. "What? I didn't mean to." "No, Lewis, it's not your fault. It's just my luck," Tiana said. She wondered for a moment if this was a shadow man. Could whatever dark powers he held reach her all the way out here? "I did it!" Charlotte yelled. The three of them turned to find Charlotte kneeling in the mud. More importantly, the bow of the boat was now free from the brambles. "Well, Lottie," Tiana said. "Great job. Except now we can't move the boat with no motor." "Yes, we can," Tiana said. "There are oars. We're going to have to paddle our way to Mama Rhodey's, but we'll get there. Let's get moving." She took over the driving duties again, not trusting anyone else to get to her destination. She was once again in control of her own destiny. "Almost there," Tiana whispered.